In 2017, I proposed a theory, Emergent Homin Theory, when I identified the MMXXII gene out of sub-Saharan Africa. Consequently, I spoke about this at the 2018 Nebraska Bigfoot Conference and received attention from one of the co-speakers there, Daniel Perez, and he connected me to Dr. Sykes of Oxford, and who had done genetic research with Zanna and the descendants through Dr. Igor Burtsev, and research completed by the late Dmitry Bayanov. At that time, I proposed the MMXXII as a marker, a genetic marker for the identification of Sasquatch, Yeti, Yeren, Yahweh for field research. And my intent was to have a genetic marker so that we could not only acknowledge that they exist, but we could use it in environmental DNA, and it could pose as a foundation for the study of hominology. Since at that time, when I did give the speech at the Bigfoot conference in Nebraska, I had also included kind of a culmination of my research at that time, and it also included the Hominoid Contagion Theory, which was also related heavily to that genetic marker, in that these hominids would be susceptible to disease contagions. And I spoke about the plague, the Black Plague in Europe. The actual name of the speech that I gave was Zanna and the Black Plague, because I had, when I identified that MMXXII in 2017, it led me to the realization that when I had researched where the Black Plague had originated, that Zanna would have actually become an orphan or had been victim by a disease contagion. And so it is interesting now that we are in an era of contagions, and specifically the coronavirus, or the Omicron, excuse me, that we are experiencing, and how that might play out for the future of this sort of research. As I've said, I hypothesized that Zanna would have been affected by the Black Plague, and that her descendants, or that her family clan most likely had been vulnerable to it, and that she was probably orphaned when they did find her. But if you're not familiar with this story, please go to my website, the Nox Gigas Study, and I detail a great deal of Zanna and her history as outlined by Dmitry Bayanov and by Dr. Burtsev. Her son Quit was a descendant of hers, and that is where Dr. Sykes had, from his relatives, Quit's relatives that were still alive and existing in Russia, was able to identify sub-Saharan Africa as an origin of her descendants. I simply identified MMXXII as the genetic marker when it was found in sub-Saharan Africa descendants, and Soule, the the people of sub-Saharan Africa, a small percentage of similar to how Neanderthal genetics were found in European descendants. So I thought that was very significant. It paralleled that. And just as Denisovian and Neanderthal had played a role in our understanding of our own genetic history, that it is a history that is not just linear, but there are vertical lines that intersect in that genetic history historically. So it's interesting to date. At that time, and I don't want to be too critical of Dr. Meldrum because I do have a lot of respect for him, but at that time he did not acknowledge the significance of my finding, and he was still, by and large, by the TV shows that he was endorsing, supporting a Gigantopithecus theory. And since then we know Gigantopithecus, its descendant is the orangutan, and that would be out of Asia, not out of Africa. So we know that Gigantopithecus is not the progenitor of the modern Sasquatch, Yeren, Russian snowman, Leshy, the Yeti, Yowie, that they in fact, from what the theory I propose, falls more in line with them coming out of Africa, which now, in fact, Dr. Meldrum in 2022 does support an out of Africa theory, but he has yet to endorse MMXXII as a genetic marker, and that seems to be our biggest obstacle right now in moving forward with something like eDNA, where we are limited with the DNA that we find, most of it because they are so closely related to Homo sapiens. It is thrown out of to contradict that it's just Homo sapien DNA and not DNA of these hominids. So a closer look, if we could use this marker, MMXXII, and funding would be funneled towards this research. And I'm not proposing I'm the one to do it, I'm just suggesting it. So whoever has the lab or is willing to take this on is more than welcome to. But what I am pointing out, this has been a huge obstacle in moving forward when it's been over 3 years now that we have a genetic marker, but there is no funding to essentially address it or move forward. So either the establishment doesn't want to move forward with a genetic research and having a genetic marker, or there is simply nobody out there willing to take it on. So perhaps this paradigm shift, which is occurring, and I believe has started with the work of Dmitry Bayanov and the late Dmitry Bayanov and Dr. Burtsev and Boris Porshnev, who identified the hominology as the study, that this could move forward more rapidly if we did coalesce funding in this research. But unfortunately, segments of the global community are not unified. And I do place the blame on someone like Dr. Meldrum, who has not unified people, when he could do much more to try to advocate for this, at least explore this MMXXII genetic marker. If we don't rule it out, we'll never know. So we have to at least take scientific efforts to explore that. And when I did develop this understanding that MMXXII was the genetic marker, it was not just based on pure hypothesis, it was based on the research of Dr. Brian Sykes, his research of the MMXXII by Dr. Gugelman, and then there was a Pan-African study done in 2019 that reaffirmed there was a link to these sub-Saharan Africa and ghost progenitor of the Y chromosome. So we are looking for that when we are doing this sort of genetic research. Now, I just wanted to briefly discuss that. What I wanted to also draw attention to is when I did talk about the Hominid Contagion Theory, which was based largely on the close genetic relationship that we have, whether it's 1% or less than 1%, that these hominids differ from us, that they would be susceptible to these diseases. And we are clearly in another epoch of a disease, the COVID-19, that may bear out some change in behaviors or death of these hominids that could lead to additional scientific discovery and really break everything open for the hominid global study of them. So I urge people to be cognizant of this. The reason I say this is what originally led me as I began research with Rez Squatching. One of the common denominators that we had discussed with my brothers Barry and D is that their relationship with Citonga, or Hins, the hairy man, had been historical, and that when I proposed a contagion 500 years ago, like smallpox, had interrupted the behavior and the interactions with the Omaha people, that would be indicative of what had happened, for instance, in the plague in Europe during that same time period. And that the reconnection that they were experiencing was a rebound of these hominids and was reflected in their numbers and their essentially lessened fear of getting around people. They had been more habituated, for instance, on the Omaha tribe. They had, near Macy, they had been coming into that community for a good 20 years or more and interacting with the people, eating from the discarded food, and just in general initiating more of a reconnection. So that's what Barry and Dee had been doing with Rez Squatching, and that's ultimately what brought us together as we began to forward the research on the Omaha Rez. So this has been a culmination of several parts of the research that I have contributed to the Bigfoot community, and my hope is that there will be greater gathering, I guess, of people coming together for a common good. My fear is that the environment of social media, which we all know has been very poisoning to a great deal of other subjects, let alone Bigfoot, but politics in general, has been divisive and has not allowed this to move forward like I think many people had anticipated. So I guess what I wanted to point out, this is in your hands as the public. I can only go so far, and I have no desire to be able to take on such a project. I have other things in my life. This is just a hobby of mine, to be quite honest. So I give praise to the good Lord that I have been gifted with this knowledge. This is Richard Soule in the land of the giants.